Hi, everyone. We're just going to give a couple of minutes for folks to join, and then we'll get started. Number is steadily rising, so we'll give it a couple more minutes. For those of you who are just logging in, we're going to let folks join, and we will get started in a minute.
We're not that serious, Hillary. There'll be some smiles, I promise. Boston.
Yes, for anyone who might be joining us from all over the country, the world, feel free to introduce yourself. And I think numbers still rising, but slowly now. So I think we'll get started. So on behalf of Black at Insight, which is Insight's Black ERG, welcome to our Black History Month event. My name is Jess, and I'm a member of Insight's Human Capital team and the head of Black at Insight. I've been with the firm since November of 2020, spent my first 2 years building out and standing up our lateral hiring function, and now I am a human capital business partner. I'm thrilled to welcome members of the Insight community, spanning from Insight employees, leaders from our portfolio companies, and diversity partnership companies, to what will be an exciting and hopefully eye-opening conversation. So for those of you who may be newer to the Insight community, we are a venture capital and private equity firm based in New York City, and we've invested in more than 600 growth stage technology and software companies. So just to go through a few housekeeping items before we get started, I see people already doing it, but feel free to engage in the chat, ask questions as the conversation progresses, introduce yourselves. My goal is to leave 10 minutes at the end of the session for questions, but I'll do my best to monitor the chat along the way. There's already a lot of activity. When you leave the event, you'll be prompted to fill out a survey. So if you have a few minutes, we encourage you to fill it out, as your feedback really helps us curate future events, both internally and for our portfolio. And this event will be recorded and posted to Insight's Go platform as well for folks who might want to go back and watch it. And lastly, we'll be sending a recap email following this session with highlights from our discussion, as well as a way to learn more and get engaged with Medley. So certainly be on the lookout for that. So let's get started. I'm extremely excited to introduce you to our two speakers today, Edith Cooper and Jordan Taylor. Before getting to their extremely impressive list of career accomplishments, I want to share that moderating this panel is particularly special to me because Edith and Jordan have served as crucial mentors, sponsors, and advocates for me throughout my career. And as a woman of color, it's been extremely important to have role models like Jordan and Edith for me to be able to envision my success. So I couldn't be prouder to be guiding the discussion with them today. So Edith and Jordan, thank you so much for being here today. And before we dive into our discussion, I'll share a little bit about Edith and Jordan's background. So starting with Edith, Edith has built her career around creating environments where people can perform to their potential, and she founded Medley to bring this expertise to a broader audience. She's one of the nation's leading Black business executives, having spent 30 years on Wall Street. Most recently, she was a partner, executive vice president, and head of human capital at Goldman Sachs. And in addition to her role as co-founder of Medley, she serves on several public company boards, including Amazon, PepsiCo, EQT Partners, and nonprofit boards such as the Museum of Modern Art, the Smithsonian, National Museum of African American History and Culture, and Mount Sinai Hospital. And moving on to Jordan, Jordan's purpose is to create teams and groups where people can be their true selves. She co-founded Medley because throughout her life, she's felt that the power that comes from being a part of a team and felt the void when it's missing. Prior to founding Medley, Jordan worked in media as chief of staff at Mike and was a consultant at the Boston Consulting Group. She received her BA from Harvard College and her MBA from Harvard Business School, where she was a Baker Scholar. So long list of accomplishments. Edith, Jordan, thank you so much for joining us today. So just to get started, dive right in. It would be great if you can share a little bit more about what Medly is and what led you to create it and what you were trying to solve in building it. So would love for both
And
of
I'm
you
happy
to
to
answer.
start.
Yep,
And
perfect.
thank you so much, Jess, for that very thoughtful introduction. And thank you everyone for taking some time out of your day and spending it with us. I can see people introducing themselves in the chat, continue to do so. And I'm really looking forward to a rich discussion. Jess, you shared this is meaningful for you. It's also meaningful for me and for Edith personally, seeing you continue to thrive, grow in your career, and impact others in this powerful way at Platform and Insight is really special to see. So, for me, in founding Medly, the concept was actually inspired by a course that I took in my final semester at Harvard Business School. At Medly, we bring people together in small groups and help them grow as leaders and as individuals. We take a very inclusive approach to how we design the experience. And so we partner with companies typically in two ways: matching groups amongst a population, really supporting emerging leaders, people who are in the middle of their career, and helping them engage over the course of 4 months with their personalized group. We also have a membership community where we match people together across companies. And it's really clear that right now, Medly has been more needed than ever, with the shifts in environment, with the blending of work and home, and lack of boundaries between those two. People are really looking for space to expand their perspectives and to grow in an integrated way. And so, as I said, concept was really inspired by a course that I took at business school. It was a leadership development class, took place in a group of 6 people. And I thought going into the course that I was going to learn about leadership and how to manage people and how to set a clear vision. And what I actually took away from the class was just how powerful it was to have that space, have that group for my own self-awareness, my own understanding of people. And we spent 2 years iterating on the model before we launched. I worked on it for about 2 weeks after graduating until Edith was like, we should be doing Medly together. She jokes that she's done the worst job at retiring ever because now she's building a startup and also on public company boards. But when I think about what's really motivating to me now on a personal level, it's continuing to grow the community, continuing to see how impactful Medly can be for people, and continuing to meet incredible leaders and talent leaders who are thinking, how can they really create the most effective space possible for their employees to thrive? And so that's what's really exciting now for me. But that also doesn't hold a candle to the joy of getting to build a business with my mother. And so Edith, would love if you could also share a little bit about what gave you the spark to decide to jump into building Medly together, and then we can keep going.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's really a pleasure to have a conversation with you, Jess. I had an instinct long ago that you were pretty extraordinary, and no doubt that has come true. And I'd say part of that is because you're centered on impact and evolving yourself in order to enable other people to do that. And that has really been the core of what's driven me throughout my career. I've had many opportunities on a variety of different aspects of the business. My most recent experience was at Goldman Sachs, as Jess mentioned, and it was really the pleasure and it was really a pleasure to be able to be at the head of a team, the human capital management team, that was really charged with understanding what it really took to create an environment where people could thrive. Moving the words of culture into actually the experience that people had. We spent a lot of time, all organizations do, on the power of teams and working collaboratively with the goal of innovating and idea generation. But we really spent very little time on how to make that happen. We had an extraordinary learning and development team, and we iterated on ideas. Coaching was something that we applied to most senior executives, but we really kind of struggled with how to get that into the organization. And Medly is an opportunity for me to take this concept of giving people the experiences of listening, learning, and engaging with other people for the benefit of yourself, but also to contribute to the whole. So Medley, is a group coaching organization. We curate groups of 6 to 8 people, match them using information that individuals provide or the organization provides, and match them with a coach, and the groups meet on a periodic, frequent basis. I think it's super important to really consider the power of human connection. I think it's even more important in the construct of this conversation that's taking place over Black History Month, because what is Black History Month? It's an opportunity for us to share and learn from each other about our culture, which is also the culture of the broader community. And so we're super excited to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much. And, as someone who was involved in Medley during its pilot phases and when it first rolled out, I can certainly attest to the experience, the ability to connect with others. And I think just the shared experience that what you're going through, you're not alone, right? There are people everywhere who are struggling with the same things you are, building their professional identity. So as someone who was able to be involved in Medley in the past, I can certainly attest to the power of what Edith and Jordan just shared. So switching topics a little bit, let's chat about your experience as Black female founders and overall just funding for underrepresented founders. So a couple of stats, Black founders only receive 1% of US venture capital each year, and women receive 2.5%. So would love to hear a little bit about, your experience as Black female founders in the current landscape of raising capital. And what are some of the most notable moments in your experience while you were building Medley?
I'm happy to start on that one. And thanks, Jess, for sharing those stats. It's 1% for Black founders, 2% for female founders, and Black women. I feel like the numbers are too dismal to really think about. But I will say it's very clear why those numbers are the way they are, just as an entrepreneur who's raised capital in very different economic environments. Our first round was a pre-seed round. We raised it at the end of 2019. We raised our seed round in the summer of 2021, found a great partner in Andreessen Horowitz. But 2021 was a very flush time for venture raising. 2019, we had an initial pilot. We had no paying customers. We had a very clear vision, and I deeply believe that Edith and my expertise is the critical expertise to build Medley and to build this business. But we got a lot of questions that felt really like people didn't believe that we could do it, that we could get it off the ground, that we could sell Medley into companies, find individuals to join. And the types of reasons we got no's for were really around sort of basic execution, which was really surprising and honestly difficult for me, because I was working and Edith and I were building Medley together, and I was like, okay, you can doubt me, but you're going to doubt her. You're going to doubt Edith. She's done such incredible things with her career.
That's so interesting, Jordan. I thought the same. I thought the exact opposite. Okay, you could doubt me, but you're going to doubt her, Jordan? Like, no.
Well, I think that just shows how much respect we have for each other. But honestly, she worked on Wall Street in commodity sales in the 80s and 90s with a Black woman, going to Texas, going to Calgary, going to all across the country, all across the world, selling like oil derivatives. Okay. And you think, building a startup is hard. I can't even imagine how challenging that was. And so that was a really difficult experience, honestly. And, the reasons around having the right network, having access to the right investors, we thought we'd be okay around. We both went to the right schools. Both of us went to Harvard. Both of us worked at, pretty respected institutions. I would say Goldman Sachs, BCG. And we thought, okay, the network is clearly a barrier, but we're going to be able to get the intros. And it just didn't pan out the way that we'd hoped. Granted, our seed round, we'd had tremendous engagement from our initial customers. We we had revenue, we had all of those important things, and we were able to run a process that ended up with a really great outcome for us. And I think we recognized, and I personally began to realize, okay, this is all I can do is set myself up from a process standpoint in a way that is setting ourselves up for success. And there's going to be people who are going to doubt me, whether it's for the color of my skin, whether it's because I'm a woman, whether it's because I'm wearing a black sweater, who knows? And all I can do is try to find those believers, try to find those people who see this as an opportunity for them to make money, which it is. And so I think I've carried that sort of into our next financing and our Series A approach, just because I really do believe it's for us about finding the believers. But I really do see it's very, very clear why those numbers are the way they are, finding access to the right investors, positioning the company in a way that the investor understands, maintaining the self-confidence necessary to go into those meetings and spread the story. But Edith, I'd be curious about your perspective on this too.
So, pattern recognition is key to so much of investing, right? And that's why organizations invest in investors that are able to take on a lot of and consider a lot of different opportunities and have a point of view and act on that point of view. In order to do that, people rely on what's familiar and what has been successful in the most recent history. And so it struck me when we were doing our pre-seed round, there was an article in published online that basically was talking about the best founders in the last year. And 19 of the 20 were men. 19 of the 20. Now, instead of looking at that and saying, wow, we really did our homework, we've got the best of the best, they should be asking, and increasingly people are asking, wait a minute, the probability that we got the best choosing 19 out of 20 that are men is zero, right? Because if you look at the stats of people, in the workplace, graduating from university, et cetera, there are a hell of a lot of women out there. There are a hell of a lot of, people of color, Black people specifically, who are extraordinary. And so it's been really important to consider changing and evolving that narrative to really looking for the extraordinary opportunities. And when you start with that aperture and the lens associated with that, then you start to listen and engage with founders in a different way. And, Jordan was correct, in those early days, you'd walk in the room and it's like, no, you're really not gonna take that tone. You're not gonna, question, because guess what? I won't do business with you. And that shift in the paradigm of who actually is in charge actually prevents one from internalizing the doubt. And I have to say, thank you for sharing those years of my travel, selling oil derivatives. It's interesting that you remembered that. I must have brought some of that work home with me. Who knows? But, I got to tell you, that was hard. But founding a business and creating a category is super, super hard. And every day you have to literally take a moment and say, why am I doing this? Because this work really matters. Why are we doing this? Because no one's better suited to do it than us. Why are we doing this? Because 5 years from now, we want people to be talking about why they need Medleys in their life. And we're going to figure out a way to get that done. And that's almost a daily kind of energy drive that you have to get from within, from your co-founder, from your colleagues, but also from the community that you deliberately curate, your medley, that gives you the perspective and the lens that is going to be important as you go out there and really drive the business forward.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks so much. And something that just came to mind, Edith, since I've known you, you've talked about the power of storytelling. And so I'm curious how storytelling came into the picture as you were talking to potential investors about Medly? What parts of your story, your journey, did you bring into that? Because as we know, investing is really a relationship business, right? Telling your story, getting people to believe in your vision. And so I'm curious from both of you, Jordan, because I know the storytelling, advice that Edith gives often, but what role did storytelling play in your journey?
Well, why don't I start with this one? I think it's been hugely important. And I think there's a question in the chat with respect to, my identity and whether I had to remove part of my identity to move forward in founding Medly or in any other work. And I have to say, it's actually owning my identity and creating a narrative in my story that has really powered me forward. Because think about it this way. If you can't tell your story in a way that you want it to be heard, then why would anyone believe that you've got conviction? Why would someone believe that you are the best founder or the best person to move forward in something? I must also tell you that it hasn't always been that for me, and it really was actually sort of the progression of time, the evolution of my career, where I was in a seat of influencing and creating culture versus a receiver of the dominant culture in organizations and one other important thing, the question, I think, Jess, you'll probably remember this, you were probably one of the people that asked me this, can you bring your true self to work? And at first, and I know you were part of the team, that when we talked about this, an analyst knew a higher symposium, 2,000 people, and someone asked me that question. And I said something like, oh, I don't wear this suit in the weekend. I wear my workout clothes, blah, 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 kind of like dance my way through it. And as I finished the conversation and walked off the stage, my team was just like, no. This is like a really important question, because what people are basically asking and what people are going to judge us on is the ability to actually show up in their best. And so that's where storytelling comes in. I really think it's been important to me and to Medly and to create that narrative of why Medly is important. It's been really important in terms of our ability to attract people, right? Because we're a startup. People have a lot of confidence to invest their time and a piece of their career in working with us and building this business. Super important for me to have a narrative. It's super important for my narrative to be in the context of Jordan's narrative. And we continue to learn and grow with each other. And that's why Medly is so important. But it takes time. I mean, I have to say, when I left my job at Goldman Sachs trying to figure out what my next move was, someone said, well, do you have a bio? And I sent them a 4-page resume because I've been working for 35 years. So it seemed like a logical thing to provide. And actually someone said to me, no, that's the narrative of your past. I need to understand the narrative of where you want to be and how you want to be positioned, like what matters to you. What do you want to be doing in the forward? Where do you want to impact? It took me 6 months, 6 months to do that.
I think that's really important that you shared that piece, that it took you 6 months to bring that articulation to life. I remember you really enlisted people in your circle to help you with that. You didn't do it on your own, sitting in front of your computer with a blank notebook saying, who am I? You really used that time to engage with other people and pulled other people into your journey still, as you thought about what you wanted and what you wanted to lean into for the next chapter of your career. And I think that just illustrates, and also in terms of the question around, have we felt like we needed to remove parts of our identity to progress our business? We're going through this huge shift right now. Edith mentioned someone asked, 5 years ago, can I bring my true self to work? Where people do expect to be able to show up as themselves. And people do, whether voluntarily or just by the nature of potentially working from home in a hybrid environment, they're pulling in elements of their life unrelated to work. And as a result, the role of the manager, the role of the company, the role of talent has gotten so much more challenging because it's not, people don't have the expectation or the desire to, you know, put on their suit, get in the office, shut out everything else. And then, you know, on the weekend, they have their workout clothes, they have their varied interests. And so that's been really interesting for us as we've, you know, begun partnering with companies, is that they're really seeing, okay, the role of a manager has never been harder. The role of an individual contributor has also never been harder, because they're struggling with the blurred boundaries, and they're really trying to think, how can I grow, and who do I want to be in my career? And Medly is really helping to fill that space, not only empowering managers and leaders to develop that new skill set, but also empowering people who are really emerging in their careers to establish themselves, establish their identity. So
Yeah, that's great. And one thing I'll add around the identity piece, and something that I've been thinking and reflecting a lot about is that, and particularly around Black History Month, like there are some of us who don't have the option to hide parts of our identity, right? So when I come into a room, I cannot hide the fact that I am a Black woman. And so I think that there's something to be said also about, of course, there might be moments where we want to, but we can't. And so how do we push forward, and how do we enter those spaces feeling confident, feeling good in our skin, and feeling like we deserve a seat at the table? So something that question prompted me to think about. And Jordan, you started to touch on this a little bit, but let's transition a little bit into thinking about the experience in the workplace, and particularly the Black experience in the workplace. So as you mentioned at Medly, you're preparing the next generation of emerging leaders. So I'm curious, what are some of the insights that you've gained around hurdles that emerging leaders face in the corporate landscape, both systemically and systematically, as well as psychologically? And if you have any insights, particularly around underrepresented and diverse emerging leaders, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. And I'll bring up 2 points on this front. I think firstly is the challenge of not having representation in senior roles, who are setting the role models, who are setting the examples for what their career could look like, or what their path could look like. You mentioned earlier on in your generous introductions that it's been helpful to you to have me and Edith as people, different stages in our careers, but who have shown you a potential path. I'm super grateful to have Edith and my mother as that example for me.
I got one mom out of this. Excellent.
Really try not to call her mom in a word context, but sometimes it's slipped out. And so I think that just presents a really concrete challenge, because when emerging leaders, and especially people from underrepresented groups, show up to work, they're thinking, okay, I'm a Black woman. You can tell that I'm a Black woman. Yet, most of the people who are at the top are men, mostly white people. What does this mean for me? Should I be trying to hide elements of myself? Should I be trying to fit in these different ways? And so that's just a huge challenge that has always existed, but is becoming more and more of a non-negotiable now, in terms of what employees are expecting from their companies in terms of support and in terms of opportunities. So that, on the one hand, is exciting to us, because I think after the events in the summer of 2020, every company was making a statement and investing, whether it's resources, time or capital, against trying to support Black people in their community and in their adjacent communities. It's been a big question for us, and thinking like, okay, when it's a really hot topic and it's really front and center, great, seems like things are happening. What is that going to mean for the long tail? And what's exciting to us now is that we are seeing a much tighter integration in talent organizations between DE&I and L&D, because it's not just okay, we're going to have additional support for the Black associates at the company. It's actually, in order to create a culture of inclusion, everybody needs to be involved in that. And it is actually unfair if that burden is just placed on people in underrepresented groups. And so, we're seeing not only tactically an integration between DE&I and L&D. We're seeing sometimes the head of L&D is also responsible for DE&I, which is really exciting for us. And it's clear that this is going to be something that's going to require investment from people with all demographics. And that's actually why in the Medley experience, you know, we definitely have some companies who will say, okay, as a vote of extra support, we're going to give Black mid-level managers or women mid-level managers access to this group coaching experience as a boost, providing them some additional space and support and space to build their leadership skills. We definitely see that happen, but we also see at the same time, which we're excited about, companies saying, hey, all of my managers should be having an experience like this, because we weave inclusivity into how we design the entire Medley experience. You know, the first orientation, there's a workshop on psychological safety and how you can create a safe space in your group before the group even starts. And so, yeah, that's just a little bit on what we're seeing, but Edith, chime in if there's anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, you know, I think you really summarized it well. I suppose I'll just add that, you know, there has to be a mental shift from on a number of fronts. You know, first of all, the concept that we as an underrepresented group need to have incremental support because we just need incremental support needs to evolve. The reason that it's super critical to create a center of gravity of learning around our communities is because it has historically been very, very difficult for us to access that in the way that the majority access it. And so people have not historically translated that if you have a friendship with someone who is just like yourself, then chances are they are getting that informal feedback, they're getting to know you better, they understand how you think, and that is actually support. And this notion that no, I separate friendships and relationships from decision making is just flawed, and it's not true. And so I think that it's really super exciting to see talent organizations that include leaders across the HR spectrum, but also across the C-suite, really starting to think around like, I am part of the challenge. And I'm also going to be part of the opportunity for the evolution of the culture in my organization by understanding those skills that are required to really create environments where people all have an opportunity to thrive. And some of this is going to sound so basic, but honestly, after decades of this, I've realized that it's not basic to everyone. Listening to people, eye contact when people are talking, noticing in a group setting that the only people who are talking talk just like you. And in fact, you probably have taken a moment to say, God, they're just great. I just love them. They're just, and you have to really start asking yourself the question, like, why is that? And the person at the end of the table who happens to be a Black woman, you know, I know they're like superstars. I know what we're talking about is what they know the most about. What am I doing or not doing to create a barrier for that person to speak up and to speak out and to show their excellence? And so that sort of evolution of a responsibility and ownership beyond super important things like giving money to small businesses, like creating inertia around learning and development opportunities that really highlight the significance of inclusion, all those things super important. But at the end of the day, what am I doing, leader? And I include myself in that. You know, I'm a Black woman. I might not necessarily have the perspective that's required to understand a Latino experience. What am I doing about that? You know, what are the things that I'm saying or asking about someone's weekend that could actually be a barrier for someone to really share what's top of mind for them? So it's leaders acting like leaders by almost not acting like leaders, by dictating the norm, but owning the responsibility of of owning the norm as part of a collective. Super, super exciting, must be super intentional, and sometimes is not so easy. But honestly, like, insight is not insight because you only do easy things, right? Anyone's on this call has actually done some pretty hard things from a business construct. Like, this should be top of the list with everything else.
Absolutely. And I mean, we touched on this idea of an inclusive leadership, and I think both of you, gave some great examples of what that looks like. So, what do you think companies can be doing to really prepare and train and support leaders with the skills to manage teams across difference, and really advance their diverse talent? We talked, a lot about what leaders themselves can do, but what can companies really do to set those leaders up with the skills and the abilities and the reflection of really how to manage across difference and how to advance their diverse talent?
I mean,
Be intentional about it.
Yeah.
Please, Jordan.
No, I mean, I think the first step is really understanding where the company is at from a cultural standpoint. It can be done in a lot of different ways. It can involve surveys, it can involve different tools. It can also just involve having 10 conversations with people at different levels of the company and hearing what they have to say. And then from there, it really does require commitment. It does require investment into making that a priority in terms of talent strategy for the upcoming 3, 6, 12 months, and then also years. It's a long-term commitment in terms of really creating an inclusive culture. And, we're really excited and impressed with the caliber of organizations that are now designed to help companies throughout this experience, whether it's, various trainings and programs. We think we're building something pretty unique and special with Medly, where inclusivity is woven into broader leadership and management coaching. But honestly, the first step is really thinking, okay, what is a reasonable level of commitment we can make given our company stage, given where we are? And also with that, enlisting not just, the people in underrepresented groups in developing inclusive leadership. And something that I think has been really core to Medly's success so far, and that we're excited to continue doing, is really understanding every company's talent strategy and leadership philosophy at that given moment. Because every company should have a different approach. I think how a company operates is a huge driver of its success. And with Medly, we're always thinking, okay, where does this Medly potentially best fit into what you're looking to achieve this year? And then how can we share insights in terms of what we're seeing in terms of best practices at other companies as well?
That's great. Edith, anything to add there?
Yeah, we have to be intentional. This is serious stuff. It's super, super important for any organization to continue to be relevant. And I believe that so deeply. If you continue to sit around the table, whatever table that you're on, and you look around and there's a lot of the same, that's actually going to be a long-term problem for you. And I think it's really important for people to do the mental homework to really understand that, and to as an individual think about how you are in a position to actually, create this excellence that's related to a breadth of experiences in your organization. And you have to be really intentional about it, whether that's doing the work to understand the whys, whether it's listening to yourself when you say, well, the issue is there's really not that many people to choose from. Well, listen to yourself, right? Okay, you highlight that as a problem. What are you going to do as part of the solution? Because I think it's super important, and we're seeing that in Medly with emerging leaders in groups, that, you actually as an individual do have a currency that can create an experience that is more conducive to what you would have wanted yourself. And notice in that sentence, I didn't say as a majority person or as an underrepresented person, as a human being. And when you start to think about it that way, then you start to really own the individual responsibility that we have. And I think it's super, super exciting. I think the direct dialogue that we are all having now, publicly and in small groups. And Black History Month is a great convening mechanism for us to talk about our experience as Black people. I think actually the only thing that will take us off this momentum is when we stop having these conversations and we stop holding ourselves individually and from an organizational construct responsible for actually creating the evolution of what it means to really be an inclusive organization.
Yep. That's great. So I know I promised 10 minutes at the end for question. We've only got 5. We have a couple of questions that have come through as we've been talking. So I will try to get to all of them, but at least 2. So Edith, I think you touched on this a little bit, but someone asked, can you share tangible examples of acting more inclusively as a leader in a meeting? So either one of you, if you have any thoughts on either what you've done or what you've seen that has worked.
Yes, so, I'll say, I've said this a couple of times and I'll keep repeating it, be intentional with your behavior. And being intentional requires that you pay attention. And so, when you're in a meeting, small or large, really be thoughtful about who has expertise that should be center of the conversation that isn't speaking up. And that could be for a variety of reasons. And really be thoughtful about that, either in the moment by asking a question. And the question shouldn't be in the mode of interrogating. It should be, Jess, I know you've done a lot of work on X. I think it would be really interesting for you to share your perspective on this question. What do you think? Do you know what a powerful thing it is when you ask someone in a room, what do you think? Particularly if you're on, the leadership side of the equation, leadership broadly defined, everyone can be a leader, but you're the senior person in the room. I mean, that's super, super powerful. When someone's speaking, listen to them. I've had experiences in meetings where I'm asked to speak and a colleague at that moment decides to do this. Not really cool. Not really cool. Is it unintentional or is it intentional? Right? Don't do those kinds of things. I'm now kind of going into the things that you should try not to do. Try not to say what Edith is trying to say. Okay, please don't do that. That's like marginalizing. And in most cases, I think people are being supportive, but think about your language. Think about how you're responding to, the majority person that's speaking versus the person whose English isn't their first language or they're speaking more softly. Think about how there might be sort of barriers to that person speaking up that you may actually be a party to. Those are very specific things that can actually shift and evolve the dynamic of a meeting so that you can get the best out of everybody in the room. Because again, why do you do that? Because if not, you're wasting 3 people's time, right? You're slowing the organization down.
Yeah, I'd love to just add something very quickly on this. I'm incredibly biased, but I think Edith is really one of the best people in the world at listening to people and picking up on things that are not said, that are not spoken. And I think listening is so closely tied to inclusivity because if you're really listening on multiple levels, you're able to see exactly as you described, the person who might be hesitating to speak up, the person who is nodding along, clearly has something to say, isn't saying it. And just something that I think is important to highlight is that being able to listen has real commercial value. Because not only are you contributing to a culture where psychologically safe ideas can be said, things aren't swept under the rug, but if you're in really any role which involves interacting with other people, it could be a sales role, it could be a product role, it could be a talent role, it could be, I would say most jobs at a company with multiple people, you're engaging with other people. If you can really try to understand what someone's looking to achieve and help them get there, there's unlimited potential in terms of your impact. And so I think sometimes we get, we see, language like, listening is like a soft skill. It's actually a skill that has really concrete, tangible impact on your career and your impact. So
That's great. So we are at time. There were some great questions in the chat. So we'll take a look at those questions, and if we can get back to you with some answers, we will. But in the interest of time, Jordan and Edith, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a great conversation. Obviously such a pleasure to do this with both of you. And thank you so much.
Hey, Jess, I'd just like to thank you and everyone on the team that's involved in the Black History Month initiatives, this being one of them. You know, we are super proud to be a part of it, and I'm super grateful to all of you for the work that you're doing and sharing your experience for the benefit of everyone at Insight or related to Insight. It is a commitment on your part, and we really appreciate that commitment.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a good rest of the day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.